Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Amita Rari, and coming up in today's newscast, tensions in Israel rise ahead of upcoming Ramadan on the eve of a regional security conference meaning to restore security cooperation. Meantime, a new poll indicating Democrat sympathies lie more with the Palestinians than Israelis. And 30,000 runners participating in the annual Jerusalem Marathon. On the eve of a regional security conference in Sharm el-Sheikh meant to diffuse tensions, Hamas sent a message of rejection by firing a rocket into Israel from Gaza. The Hamas rocket fire coming hours after Palestinian Authority announced that it would take part in the scheduled conference in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt aimed at restoring security cooperation between Israel and the Palestinians. ILTV Steve Leibovich reports.
The single rocket fired by Hamas from Gaza came hours after the Palestinian Authority announced that it would take part in the conference in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt aimed at restoring security cooperation between Israel and the Palestinians. The rocket fell harmlessly in an open area near Nahal Oz without causing injury, but its message of rejection was clear. Israel, the PA, Egypt, Jordan, and the U.S. are part of the gathering of top security officials that follows the initial meeting last month in Aqaba, Jordan. The meeting comes amid an upsurge in Palestinian attacks and Israeli security operations with the always tense Ramadan holiday beginning on Wednesday. This weekend, there were several security incidents in Judea and Samaria. On Friday, soldiers shot and killed a 23-year-old terrorist who tried to stab them at the Beit El junction near Ramallah. Soldiers reportedly opened fire after the attacker suddenly came at them with a knife. Earlier, 4 Palestinians were killed during a raid in Jenin on a terror cell. Special forces shot and killed 2 terrorists as well as 2 others during an exchange with gunmen offering resistance. Police said that one of the terrorists was connected to the local Jenin brigade, which was planning to carry out a major attack, and the other was a bomb maker. The Israeli forces returned safely to base. In addition to the rocket fire from Gaza and the violence in Judea and Samaria, Israel is keeping a close eye on the northern border following last week's infiltration and bombing at the Megiddo junction that seriously wounded an Israeli man. Visiting the northern border, Defense Minister Gallant said those responsible would be held accountable. Security officials are still investigating whether the Lebanese terrorist group Hezbollah was involved.
Israel is facing intense days ahead of Ramadan, Passover, and a little further away Memorial and Independence Days. And we're now joined by Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs Research Fellow and journalist Yoni Ben Menachem with the latest updates. Hi, Yoni. There's a security summit in Sharm el-Sheikh with Israel and the Palestinian Authority attempting to achieve some level of cooperation ahead of Ramadan. Do you expect the efforts will succeed?
Definitely not. Don't wait for any success from this meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh. The last meeting in Aqaba a few weeks ago failed completely, and there's no chance that this meeting today will succeed. There is a strategic decision of Iran and the Palestinian terrorist organizations to launch a new intifada against Israel during Ramadan. Nothing that Israel can do can change their strategic decision.
So you're basically saying there's no point at all in holding such meetings, conferences, whatsoever?
No, Israel and also the PA had to reply or had to agree with the American request to hold such meetings for security coordination, but we have to be realistic and not expect too much out of these meetings.
There are reports that Hamas pressured the PA to stay away from the summit. Perhaps the rocket fired last night was a sign of their opposition?
Yes, it was a sign for their opposition. There was also public statement and calls for the PA to boycott the meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh, but also the rocket was also some sort of a retaliation to the IDF operation in Jenin last week, and it's not important what the terrorist organizations are doing. What is important is what the IDF will do to thwart all the attempts to carry out terrorist attacks.
Now, Ramadan is fast approaching, and it's a time of increased tension generally, as you also mentioned. What's your forecast for the coming days, and what is Israel doing to prepare?
I think that we should anticipate a new wave of terrorism from all sides, from all fronts, in the West Bank, in Israel itself, from Gaza, and from south of Lebanon, because, as I said, there is a strategic decision of Iran and a terrorist organization to carry out such attacks during Ramadan. Israel is preparing and also going to the offensive. Today we saw an assassination of one of the Islamic Jihad military commanders in Damascus. The Islamic Jihad claims that the Israeli Mossad is the one who assassinated him. I believe to accept this estimation, and I think that we will see more assassinations also in the coming weeks.
That's interesting, Yoni. Now, speaking of Mossad, in recent days, our former head of Mossad and our former head of Shin Bet, they spoke about the current possibility of civil strife over judicial reform. Are our enemies actually listening?
Of course, the enemies are listening, and especially Hezbollah. You hear Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, saying that Israel is weak like the spider web. He's repeating this sentence all the time, and they are sure that Israel is going to fall apart, and it's up to us, the Israelis, to keep national unity and fight terrorism in spite of the differences among ourselves.
We definitely feel that this is Israel's strength. Yoni, thank you so much for your updates. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
A night of mass protest and violence against the backdrop of protests in Kfar Uriah, and after another day of disruption on Thursday, tens of thousands of protesters protested Saturday night in Tel Aviv, but also in Jerusalem, Haifa, Or Akiva, and Netanya. Violent clashes took place in several arenas, including attempts of runovers, spitting, throwing eggs, and firecrackers at demonstrators. One more Saturday night with thousands of Israelis taking the streets in the now 11th week of nationwide protests against the government judicial overhaul. On Saturday morning, a group of demonstrators arrived in Kfar Uriah near Bet Shemesh as they heard Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir was spending the weekend there. Clashes broke out between protesters, police, and residents of the central village, with police saying they arrested a man who threw rocks at the demonstrators, and 2 protesters were detained on suspicion of disturbing public order and refusing to obey a police officer's instructions. After rejecting the president's outline, the coalition will continue advancing legislation this week. In the coming days, the Constitution Committee will convene for a marathon of debates dealing with the proposal to change the composition of the Committee for the Selection of Judges so that the coalition will have a majority in it, and the proposal to cancel the possibility of the High Court of Justice to intervene or invalidate fundamental laws enacted by the Knesset. Both proposals will be prepared for a second and third reading and have not undergone any changes so far. The coalition is interested in softening the reform, but a final agreement has not yet been reached. The coalition's timetable is structured according to a plan in which these 2 sections will be approved in 3 readings by the end of the Knesset's winter conference in 2 weeks. It is estimated that other parts of the reforms, such as the override clause and more, will be postponed after recess or to another date. Likud yesterday rejected reports that they intend to freeze reform parts for a year and approve only the change in the composition of the Committee for the Selection of Judges. Meanwhile, a special Knesset committee will continue to promote the impeachment law that will prevent the prosecutor or the High Court from declaring Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's impeachment due to his legal affairs. The bill was approved in the first reading, and the coalition aims to advance it to final approval even before the Knesset goes into recess.